Agatha Raisin and Sir Charles Fraith's double game. A quiet village morning unravels into secrets, lies, and a trail that pulls Agatha deeper than she ever intended. Settle in, mystery lover. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Carsely woke to a crisp blue morning that looked far more cheerful than it had any right to be. Agatha Raisin, standing at her bedroom window with a frown, mistrusted any weather that tried to appear innocent. Bright skies usually meant trouble later. Sunburn, gossip, or social obligations. Today promised the worst of the three. Hodge, curled in a warm patch of light on the duvet, opened one eye as Agatha attempted to squeeze herself into a pastel blouse purchased during what she now recognized as a deranged moment of optimism in Evesham. She tugged it down with a growl. "Don't look at me like that," she told the cat. "Women's Institute brunches don't run themselves, you know." Hodge yawned pointedly. Agatha clipped on earrings, dabbed powder, and practiced an expression that suggested she belonged at a spring harmony brunch. She did not. She despised the very notion of communal harmony, especially before lunch. Still, the WI expected her presence, and Agatha had learned, painfully, that absence only encouraged wilder gossip. Outside, the village shimmered with early light. Honeystone cottages glowed warmly. A faint breeze stirred the hedgerows, carrying the distant clatter of folding chairs being arranged at the WI hall. Agatha marched along the lane, Hodge trotting a short distance in moral support, until he decided he'd gone far enough and returned home. By the time Agatha pushed open the WI hall door, the place was an explosion of floral enthusiasm. Tables groaned under the weight of homemade quiches, scones, fruit tarts, and the sort of aggressively cheerful flower arrangements only Carsely could produce. Everything smelled of lavender polish, warm pastry, and pride. Agatha placed her own contribution, a plate of supermarket pastries dusted with sugar, on the table with a guilty cough. It looked miserably outclassed. Doris Simpson glanced over, eyes narrowing like a cat spotting an inferior rival. "Oh, Agatha, how lovely," Doris said, voice dripping with triumphant pity. "They're French," Agatha retorted sharply. "Authentic." Mrs. Bloxby drifted over, serene as ever, and gave Agatha a warm smile that somehow absolved all sins. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Raisin. We're just finding our seats." Agatha rolled her shoulders back and strode forward. Too quickly, as it turned out. Her heel caught on a string of decorative bunting thoughtfully draped across the aisle. She pitched forward with a strangled sound, lurched towards a towering display of daffodils, and crashed into it with the force of a disgruntled sheep charging a gate. Gasps filled the hall. A tray of sausage rolls wobbled dangerously. Someone muttered, "Oh my word." Another whispered, "She's done it again." Agatha extricated herself from the crushed flowers, petals sticking to her blouse like confetti. She muttered something unsuitable for village ears. Mrs. Bloxby hurried over, kindly amusement trembling at the corners of her mouth. "Are you hurt?" "Only my dignity," Agatha snapped, "and that died years ago." Bill Wong, standing in the doorway inspecting the chaos, coughed loudly into his hand, clearly to smother a laugh. Doris Simpson was already whispering furiously to a cluster of WI ladies, and Agatha could imagine the headlines, "Agatha Raisin Levels Spring Brunch Display." Before she could gather what remained of her dignity, a familiar voice drawled behind her. "Good heavens, Aggie, it's a bit early in the year for harvesting daffodils." Charles Fraith appeared, immaculate as always, wearing the sort of amused expression Agatha longed to slap off his handsome face. He extended a hand and pulled her upright with theatrical gallantry. "You can drop dead," Agatha muttered. "I might, if you keep hurling yourself at flower displays. It's dangerous business." Before Agatha could retort, another figure approached, a tall, silver-haired man with tailored confidence and the kind of smile that made women lean in and men check their wallets. His voice carried a smooth, expensive undertone. "Sir Charles Fraith, I believe," he said. Charles stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Sir Lionel Ashcroft. Didn't expect to see you here." "Nor I you," Sir Lionel replied, eyes flicking toward Agatha with courteous interest. "But since I have, I wonder if we might speak privately, about the matter we discussed." Agatha lifted an eyebrow. "Discussed? With Charles? When?" Charles's smile tightened. "This isn't the place." "Nonsense." Sir Lionel's gaze was warm but fixed. "This evening, then. A private dinner. I insist." Charles hesitated long enough for Agatha to notice. "Very well," he finally said. Sir Lionel nodded politely to Agatha, then moved away. She watched him go, annoyance prickling along her spine. "What matter is this?" she demanded. Charles adjusted his cuff. "Oh, nothing interesting." "Which means it's something extremely interesting," Agatha said, "and you'll be telling me eventually." "No doubt," Charles replied, unbothered. His charm irritated her more than the ruined daffodils. The brunch muddled on. Villagers alternated between sympathetic pats and smirks whenever Agatha approached. Doris Simpson naturally managed both simultaneously. Even Mrs. Bloxby's gentle reassurance couldn't entirely temper Agatha's simmering humiliation. When the final applause faded and chairs scraped across the hall floor, Agatha slipped out before anyone else could mention the flowers. She walked briskly through the village, ignoring the curious looks from neighbours tidying gardens or washing cars. Hodge met her halfway down the lane, weaving around her ankles as she strode home. She pushed open her cottage door, threw her handbag onto the sofa, and paced the room with mounting irritation. Her mind hummed with two unwelcome thoughts. First, Sir Lionel Ashcroft. Smooth, charming, unsettling. Why was he summoning Charles to a private dinner, and why had Charles looked as though he'd swallowed a lemon? Second, her own humiliation. She had landed in the flowers like a collapsing tent. Carsely would dine out on that story for weeks. Agatha sank onto the sofa, rubbing her forehead. Hodge leapt up beside her, settling with smug comfort. "You're the only male in this county who doesn't annoy me," Agatha said. Hodge blinked his agreement. A tapping came at the front window. Mrs. Bloxby's neighbour, a timid woman named Janet Hill, stood outside, looking anxious. Agatha opened the door before Janet could knock. "Mrs. Raisin, sorry to bother you, but I thought you ought to know. Someone saw Sir Lionel behind the hall earlier." Janet lowered her voice. "Arguing with Charles Fraith." Agatha's heart gave a small, victorious leap. She tried to hide it. "Arguing? About what?" "I didn't hear," Janet said, but voices were raised. When Janet hurried away, Agatha shut the door and leaned against it, eyes narrowing with fierce satisfaction. Charles Fraith was hiding something, and Agatha Raisin, bruised pride and all, intended to find out exactly what it was. She glanced at Hodge. "This brunch may not have been a total disaster," she said. "Not if it leads somewhere interesting." Hodge stretched lazily, unimpressed. Agatha, on the other hand, felt the familiar, delicious prickling of the unknown beginning to stir. By the next morning, drizzle clung to Carsely like a damp accusation. Agatha Raisin stood at her kitchen sink, glaring out at the grey sky as though it had personally insulted her. She felt the same sour mood spreading inside her chest, left over from yesterday's floral catastrophe and that infuriating scene with Charles. Hodge sat on the kitchen table, washing a paw with serene indifference. Agatha envied him. Cats never woke up feeling humiliated. She slammed the kettle onto the stove, then seized the phone. Charles Fraith was going to answer for himself. He picked up on the fourth ring, sounding maddeningly well-rested. "Fraith." "Don't Fraith me," Agatha snapped. "What's all this business with Sir Lionel Ashcroft? And don't dodge the question." Charles gave a long, theatrical sigh. "Aggie, it's far too early for interrogations. I haven't even had my boiled egg." "You can have your boiled egg in prison if you keep dodging me, Charles Fraith." "Prison? Good heavens. What's Sir Lionel told you?" "Nothing," Agatha said, "which is precisely the problem." Charles's voice shifted into that lazy, aristocratic drawl she hated. "There's nothing dramatic to tell. A simple misunderstanding. Boring, really." "If you think I'm going to believe that, you're delusional," she snapped. He chuckled, actually chuckled, and Agatha nearly slammed the phone into the wall. "Goodbye, Aggie. Go have a calming cup of tea." Click. Agatha glared at the receiver. Smug, evasive, maddening. She swore under her breath and grabbed her raincoat. If Charles wouldn't tell her, someone else certainly would. She marched through Carsely, drizzle speckling her hair, and reached the vicarage in a temper that would have frightened lesser women. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door with her warm, serene smile, as though expecting nothing less. "You're early, Mrs. Raisin," she said gently. "Come in out of the wet." Inside, the vicarage sitting room glowed with firelight and the scent of newly baked ginger biscuits, that soothing domestic smell that always unsettled Agatha slightly. Mrs. Blocksby poured tea and waited, patient as ever. Agatha set her cup down with unnecessary force. "Tell me everything you know about Sir Lionel Ashcroft." Mrs. Blocksby blinked. "Sir Lionel? Well, I know that he's recently taken the Ashcroft estate for a few months. A widower, very wealthy, generous to local charities, I understand." "And the rumours?" Agatha pressed. Mrs. Blocksby hesitated only a moment. "Some say he's interested in acquiring farmland near several villages. Others suggest he's persuasive in his negotiations." "Persuasive," Agatha repeated. "You mean blackmail?" Mrs. Blocksby's voice was mild. "I mean business can be complicated, and he has a reputation for increasing his advantage." Agatha crossed her arms. "Charles is hiding something. I know it. He practically ran from the room when Sir Lionel approached him yesterday." "Perhaps he was embarrassed," Mrs. Blocksby said gently. "Perhaps it's a private matter." "Private matters with Charles are never private," Agatha muttered. Before Mrs. Blocksby could reply, the door to the sitting room burst open, and Roy Silver entered in a gust of rain, wind, and dramatic despair. His vivid turquoise scarf dripped onto the vicarage rug. "Agatha, darling," he cried. "I came as soon as I heard. Are you all right? The fall sounded dreadful. Carsely is practically humming with it." Agatha groaned. "Perfect. The London gossip service has arrived." Roy collapsed into a chair with a sigh. "Honestly, Aggie, if you must make spectacles of yourself, at least warn me. I could have arranged press." "Roy," she warned. Mrs. Blocksby smiled kindly. "Do have some tea, Mr. Silver." "Oh, marvellous. Tea fixes everything." He leaned in. "Now, tell me all about this Sir Lionel. The man is positively delicious." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Roy, we are not discussing Sir Lionel's deliciousness. We are investigating him." Roy brightened. "In that case, let's go somewhere with proper gossip." Which was how Agatha found herself trudging through Evesham with Roy Silver at her side, still dripping rain and melodrama. They ducked into a small bistro for lunch. The air smelled of coffee and toasted cheese. Agatha ordered soup. Roy ordered something with too many syllables. She was just beginning to relax when Roy froze, eyes widening. "Aggie, don't look now, but those two women over there are talking about Sir Lionel." Agatha immediately looked. Roy sighed. At the next table, two middle-aged women leaned in over their teacups. "I'm telling you, he was there last night," one said. "Private dining room at the Mercester Hotel. Very hush-hush." "And Charles Fraith?" the other asked. "Didn't show. Left the poor man waiting like a jilted bride." Agatha felt jealousy twist in her stomach. "Charles didn't show because he told me he was going home to do accounts." "There's more," the woman continued. "I heard he was seen driving toward Moreton-in-Marsh later, with a woman in a green coat." Roy inhaled sharply. "Aggie, darling, this is better than telly." Agatha's mouth tightened. "Woman in a green coat," she repeated. "Who?" "That's what I'd like to know," Roy said cheerfully. Agatha didn't answer. She was already standing, dropping coins on the table. "We're going back, now." Charles Fraith answered his manor door with an infuriatingly pleasant expression. "Aggie, how nice. Do come in." "Cut the charm, Charles," she said. "Where were you last night?" "At home," Charles replied, "balancing my accounts." "So, not at the Mercester Hotel?" "Certainly not." "And not driving with a mysterious woman in a green coat?" Charles blinked, then laughed, that low, teasing laugh that always sounded as though he knew something she didn't. "Honestly, Aggie, you do let gossip run away with you." "This isn't gossip," Agatha snapped. "This is evidence." "It's Carsely," Charles corrected. "Everything is gossip." Before she could throttle him, the doorbell rang. Charles opened it, but his charm slipped instantly. Sir Lionel Ashcroft stood on the doorstep, perfectly composed, perfectly dangerous. "Charles," Sir Lionel said, voice smooth, "we need to talk." Charles hesitated. Agatha noticed it with hungry satisfaction. "Not now," Charles said. "Now," Sir Lionel repeated. Agatha stepped forward. "Perhaps I should—" "No," both men said quickly. Charles turned to her. "Aggie, would you mind? This is private." "Private my foot," Agatha muttered, but she was guided firmly toward the door and deposited outside like a parcel. The door closed. Agatha stood on the gravel drive, rain misting her hair, irritation rising like steam. She hated being shooed anywhere, especially by men being mysterious in large estates. She walked home briskly, muttering curses the whole way. At her cottage, Hodge met her in the hallway, tail swishing with expectation. "Oh, fine," she said, bending to scoop his food. "You're the only male who appreciates me around here." She fed him, tossed her coat aside, and finally lit a cigarette, a rare treat these days, reserved for moments of severe irritation or emotional crisis. "Charles Fraith," she declared to the empty room, "is up to something stupid, criminal, romantic, or all three." She exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. Tomorrow, she would find out which. And in Carsely, she reflected grimly, tomorrow always came with trouble. The next morning, under a sullen lid of cloud, the sort that made even the sparrows sound doubtful, Agatha Raisin stepped outside her cottage and grimaced as the drizzle of dawn strengthened into something heavier and more accusatory. It was the sort of rain that felt personal. She pulled her coat tight and set off toward Sir Lionel's rented estate with a briskness that suggested she had already decided the day was going to misbehave. News travelled fast in the village, faster than common sense, slower than gossip. By the time Agatha reached the lane leading to Sir Lionel's property, a healthy crowd had already gathered behind the stretch of police tape fluttering weakly in the wet wind. People stood in clumps, exchanging theories with relish. He's gone, vanished, run off with someone, or been murdered. It was exactly the sort of chaos Agatha secretly thrived on. Bill Wong emerged from the house, rain dripping off his hair and patience fraying at the edges. His expression softened slightly when he saw Agatha, then pinched again when he remembered she was the last person he wanted meddling. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," he said. "I suppose you've heard." Agatha lifted her chin. "Of course I've heard. What's happened?" Bill hesitated, but the villagers' eager ears forced him to lower his voice. "Sir Lionel has disappeared. There are signs of a struggle inside, a splintered chair, a smashed glass, spilled wine, and—" He paused. "Oh, get on with it, Bill. I've seen worse at WI buffet nights." "A smear of blood on the floorboards," he finished quietly. "Not enough to suggest a fatal injury, but he's missing. House empty. No note." Agatha felt a prickle of something colder than the rain. Sir Lionel might be rude, smug, and excessively polished, but he didn't seem like the type who vanished without telling anyone, least of all a man he was threatening the night before. "And Charles?" Agatha asked too quickly. Bill's expression hardened. "Charles claims nothing unusual happened after you left his manor. Says he stayed home all evening, but neighbours near this house reported raised voices. 2 men shouting." Agatha folded her arms, refusing to be rattled. "People shout all the time, especially men with too much money and too little sense." "There's more," Bill said. "We found a green wool fibre on the broken chair." Agatha's breath caught. The woman in the green coat. Whoever she was circling the case like a fox around a henhouse. Bill continued. "If you know anything about this woman—" "I know nothing," Agatha lied swiftly, "except she clearly has terrible taste." Bill gave her a long, exhausted look. "Stay out of this, Agatha. Please, for once." Agatha ignored him and leaned past the tape to study the ground. Everyone else had been looking at the mess inside, but Agatha's instincts tingled at the garden gate. She spotted it, faint, nearly washed away by rain, but visible enough to someone determined, a subtle footprint angled away from the house, its heel deeper than the toe. "There," she said triumphantly. Bill looked, sighed, and wiped his wet forehead. "We saw it." They had not, Agatha was certain, but she let him have it. He looked tired enough to drop. The rain thickened as Agatha pulled away from the crowd and marched back toward Carsely. Her coat clung damply to her arms, but her mind moved with dangerous clarity. Sir Lionel was missing. Charles was lying. A green coat had materialized in 2 different conversations, and somewhere in all that damp confusion, a motive waited like a knot in wool. Back in Carsely, the village green looked dreary in the downpour. The bunting from the Spring Harmony brunch sagged in defeat, but the drizzle did little to deter the local rumour mill. By lunchtime, gossip roared to full flame. Doris Simpson buttonholed Agatha outside the shop. "I've heard," she said breathlessly, "that Sir Lionel stole jewellery from aristocratic widows. They say he collected it, like trophies." "He collected wine, Doris," Agatha snapped, "and possibly bad ideas." "Well, that's not all," Doris went on. My cousin in Mercester said he cheated at charity auctions, and the Red Lion barman told me he ran land scams in the north. Agatha sighed. Doris, please. We're dealing with facts, not fantasy. But in Carsely there was very little difference. At the Red Lion, a damp crowd whispered in alcoves. The barman leaned over the counter. I knew he was trouble, he said. The type who tips too much, you know. People who tip too much are hiding something. Agatha raised an eyebrow. She had always found tipping modestly hid more flaws than generosity. Back at the vicarage, Mrs. Blocksby offered a quieter perspective. Sometimes, she said, gently pouring tea, lonely men look mysterious simply because they don't know how to fit in. I don't believe Sir Lionel was wicked. He was arguing with Charles, Agatha said. That's wicked enough. Mrs. Blocksby's eyes softened. Are you worried for Charles? Of course not, Agatha snapped a fraction too quickly. He's infuriating and smug and probably involved in something, somehow. Mrs. Blocksby's knowing smile said everything. Evening crawled in slow and grey. Agatha paced her cottage, kettle whistling on the stove. Hodge lay curled on the sofa, tail twitching in mild disapproval of the weather or Agatha's restlessness, possibly both. A knock rattled the cottage door. Agatha opened it to find Charles Fraith standing on her step, collar damp, expression unusually strained. Aggie, he said quietly, may I come in? She let him, though her expression suggested he'd better earn the privilege. Charles hovered awkwardly near the fireplace. I shouldn't be here, he said. Bill will think I'm meddling. You are meddling, Agatha said. And lying. Start talking. He sat heavily. Sir Lionel and I did argue last night after you left. It was about an inheritance matter, a mutual acquaintance. He wanted something I couldn't give him. Money? Agatha asked. No, Charles hesitated. Information. Agatha's eyes narrowed. About what? About someone I promised not to mention. He rubbed his forehead. Look, Aggie, I know how this looks, but I'm not hiding anything criminal. Agatha snorted. That's exactly what someone hiding something criminal would say. Charles didn't rise to the bait. I'm telling you the truth, as much of it as I can. It wasn't good enough. She could feel it, that evasive softness around the edges of his words. He was lying or avoiding something, which was almost worse. After a few more vague reassurances, Charles stood. I'll be in touch, and please keep out of this. He left before she could retort. That alone was suspicious. Charles never fled a conversation unless cornered. Agatha locked the door, irritation and unease swirling together like overbeaten batter. She was about to sit when Hodge hissed suddenly, paws stiff. Agatha froze. A shadow moved outside the window, tall, still, watching. She stepped toward the glass, but the figure turned and vanished into the drizzle before she could make out a face. The cottage fell silent. Even Hodge seemed to listen. Agatha swallowed. Well, she muttered, that's just perfect. She found it the next morning, after fitful sleep and 2 cups of strong tea. A green coat lying abandoned beside the village pond, half soaked and tangled in reeds. The mysterious woman had returned, or fled. And Agatha Raisin, instinct prickling sharply now, knew the case had just begun. By early afternoon the sky turned pale and washed out, that hinted at sunshine but couldn't quite commit. Agatha Raisin stood at her cottage door with the green coat clutched in one hand, and irritation simmering behind her eyes. She had found the coat at the pond before breakfast, half soaked, half hidden, and wholly suspicious. Hodge had sniffed it once, sneezed, and stalked away. Agatha took this as confirmation of its dodgy origins. The coat, once stylish, now sagged in damp folds. Its label read, Marina Dovecoat. Agatha mouthed the name with distaste. It practically screamed glamour and trouble. 2 things she usually enjoyed, provided they weren't better dressed than she was. She shoved the coat under her arm and strode toward Charles Fraith's manor with the grim determination of a woman on the warpath. The sky brightened as she marched, the soft sunlight warming the honeystone walls, but Agatha's mood refused to lighten. She hammered at Charles's door. He answered at once, hair rumpled, expression wary. Aggie, he said. Your timing is terrible, she snapped. I know. Get your coat. We're going to Morton-in-Marsh. Why? He asked, voice edged with dread. Agatha shoved the green coat at him. Because of her. Charles examined the coat with a frown. Where on earth did you find this? By the pond, and unless Marina Dovecote has decided to take up wild swimming in full wool, she didn't leave it there by choice, Charles sighed. You don't even know her. That's the point, Agatha said. I want to know her, preferably before she runs off, dies, or murders someone. Charles gave her a long look. You're impossible, and you're coming with me. The drive to Morton-in-Marsh unfolded under a sky that finally decided on sunshine, scattering bright patches across the hedgerows. Charles's vintage convertible hummed along, roof down despite Agatha's protests about her hair. She gripped the green coat like evidence in a courtroom. Tell me about Marina Dovecote, Agatha demanded. Charles shifted uncomfortably. Real estate consultant, glamorous, clever, managed several countryside developments. She handled a small matter for my estate once. A small matter, Agatha repeated. What sort of small? Mouse-sized? Mansion-sized? A land valuation, he said shortly. Agatha's eyes narrowed. You're hiding something. Aggie, I'm driving. You can hide and drive. Men do it all the time. Charles made a noise somewhere between a groan and a laugh. They reached Marina's office, a smart, modernized cottage with a discreet sign, Dovecote Rural Properties. The front door was locked. Agatha cupped her hands to the window and peered inside. It's been ransacked, she breathed. The interior lay in disarray, drawers open, papers scattered, a chair toppled. Charles unlocked the door. Agatha didn't ask how he had a key. She added it to her growing file of suspicions, and stepped inside. Good Lord, he muttered. This wasn't like this before. Before when? Agatha demanded. Last week. You've been here recently? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think, she said. A door creaked from next door. A nosy neighbour appeared, a small man in gardening gloves and a jumper 3 sizes too big. Looking for Miss Dovecote? He asked, chipper despite the scene. You've missed her. When was she last seen? Agatha asked. 3 days ago. Came out of the office in a right state, all pale and upset. Got into a car with a grey-haired bloke. Looked a bit like that Sir Lionel fellow. Agatha and Charles exchanged a grim look. Did she leave anything behind? Agatha asked. Not that I'd know, the neighbour said, but she was muttering something about being set up. Looked frightened. Agatha thanked him and ushered Charles out before the man could launch into pruning tips. Tell me everything, she demanded. Charles ran a hand through his hair. Marina and Sir Lionel had a meeting a few weeks ago. She accused him of fraud, land fraud. He denied it, loudly. I tried to intervene. It didn't go well. Agatha stared at him. So you and Marina had motives to confront him. Aggie, don't Aggie me. She began pacing. Marina was scared. Sir Lionel was furious, and you were evasive. I wasn't evasive, Charles said evasively. They drove back toward Carsely in taut silence. The bright morning had deepened into a crisp blue afternoon, the kind that made the countryside look deceptively peaceful. Agatha, gripping the coat, watched the fields blur past. Why didn't you tell me about Marina? She demanded. Because I knew you'd overreact. I don't overreact, Agatha protested. You've taken a coat hostage. Evidence, she corrected. Fine. Evidence. Agatha leaned back, annoyed that Charles looked amused. The Red Lion was bustling when they arrived. The scent of chips and ale drifted through the room. The fire crackled warmly. Villagers leaned in close over their pints, voices low and eager. Marina and Sir Lionel were lovers, someone whispered. Rubbish. She blackmailed him. No, she worked for him, or stole from him. Agatha rolled her eyes. Idiots, she muttered, though she kept her ears open. Bill Wong appeared at the doorway, shoulders sagging. He spotted Agatha instantly, which only seemed to worsen his headache. Mrs. Raisin, he sighed, and Mr. Fraith. Bill, Charles said, attempting helpfulness. It failed. Bill focused on Agatha. I understand you found a coat. Agatha blinked innocently. A coat? Oh, yes, a coat. Very fashionable. Bill's eyes narrowed. Where did you find it? Nearby, Agatha said helpfully. How nearby? Within reasonable walking distance. Bill closed his eyes briefly. Mrs. Raisin, withholding evidence is obstructing an investigation. Oh, Bill, Agatha said sweetly, I would never obstruct anything. I merely curate information. Charles winced. Bill sighed. We're trying to determine Marina Dovecote's connection to Sir Lionel. Anything you know." "I'll tell you everything," Agatha said promptly, "once I've sorted it." Bill rubbed his temples. "Please stay out of trouble." "Trouble?" Agatha echoed. "I'm offended." "You shouldn't be," Bill muttered. As the detective left, Agatha sniffed indignantly. Charles looked at her with dry amusement. "You enjoy winding him up." "It keeps him sharp," Agatha said. That evening, Agatha spread her findings across her coffee table: coat, notes, impressions, and an over-sharpened pencil. Hodge sat among the papers like a furry paperweight, occasionally swatting at her pen. Agatha lifted the coat again, inspecting its seams. Something caught her eye, and a faint stain inside the lining, dark and sticky. Wine. She sniffed it. Expensive wine. And the very same vintage spilled on Sir Lionel's floor. "So," she murmured, "Marina was there." But was she witness or attacker? A sharp thud startled her. Something slid through her letterbox and landed on the rug. Hodge jumped. Agatha strode over and bent to retrieve it, a small folded note written in slanted hand. "Ask Charles about the vineyard." Agatha stared at the words, pulse quickening. Vineyard? What vineyard? And why Charles? She grabbed her coat and headed straight for the door. There was no way she was sleeping now. Charles Fraith opened his door with startled irritation. "Aggie, what now?" Agatha shoved the note into his hand. He read it. His face went slightly grey. "Ah," he said quietly. "Ah?" Agatha repeated. "That's all you've got?" Charles met her gaze. "We need to talk, and you're not going to like it." She folded her arms. "I rarely do." They stood in the soft glow of the porch light, the late evening air cool and sharply scented with damp leaves. A mystery was blooming, fast, tangled, irresistible, and Agatha Raisin felt the familiar thrill rising. She was in deeper than she intended, and this time Charles was right in the middle of it. The next morning dawned with a thin thread of sunshine slipping over Carsely's rooftops, the kind of shy brightness that tried to cheer the world without quite managing it. Agatha Raisin marched up Charles Fraith's drive with the brisk, purposeful stride of a woman whose patience had expired before breakfast. She still carried the green coat like a banner of impending judgment. Charles opened the door before she could knock, as though he'd been waiting nervously behind it. His hair was slightly mussed, his expression even more so. "Aggie," he began cautiously, "before you start—" "Too late," Agatha snapped. "What is this vineyard nonsense, and why am I learning about it through anonymous notes shoved under my door like threats from a demented postman?" Charles winced and gestured her inside. "This is going to require context." "Oh, good," Agatha muttered. "My favourite thing in the morning, context." He led her into his study, a characteristically masculine room filled with polished oak, leather-bound books, and just enough aristocratic dust to suggest respectability. Charles walked to a tall cabinet in the corner, hesitated, and opened it with the reluctant air of a man confessing to a secret drawer of love letters. Inside sat rows of bottles, deep green glass, elegant labels, expensive corks. Agatha leaned in, eyes gleaming. "Wine," she breathed. "Imported. Fancy. Probably overpriced." "Correct on all counts," Charles admitted. "These come from Sir Lionel's vineyard in Provence." Agatha gave a low whistle. "So you drank his wine?" "Bought," Charles corrected. "At full price?" "Fool!" Charles sighed. "An exorbitant price, actually." Agatha tilted her head. "You're being suspiciously humble, Charles. Start talking." He took a bottle down and held it like a fragile confession. "Sir Lionel sold me a crate of what he claimed was rare vintage, exceptional quality, a bargain for a friend." "Friends don't exist in business," Agatha said. "Only fools and sharks." "Quite." Charles set the bottle on the desk. "When I opened them, they were counterfeit. Cheap wine in expensive packaging. A complete scam. If I'd served it at a dinner party, I'd never have recovered my reputation." Agatha burst into delighted laughter. "You? Duped by a connoisseur of vinegar? Charles, that's marvellous." "It is not marvellous," he said stiffly. "It is humiliating." "Oh, it's delicious," Agatha corrected. "He sold you fake wine for a fortune. That gives you motive." "I don't have a motive. I threatened to expose him. He threatened to ruin my estate prospects in retaliation, that's all. Charles Fraith, Agatha said, delighted. You have finally been involved in scandal that isn't romantic. Don't start. Oh, I'm starting, Agatha said, leaning in mischievously. Blackmail, fraud, aristocratic embarrassment. This case has everything I love. Agatha insisted they track down Sir Lionel's daughter next, refusing to let Charles out of her sight. The drive to Mercester rolled past fields edged with crisp winter sunlight. For once, the weather seemed determined not to brood. Celia Ashcroft answered her cottage door with an air of tired politeness. She was a woman in her mid-40s, neatly dressed, eyes watchful behind intelligent glasses. Her home smelled of furniture polish and restrained grief. "You're here about my father," she said quietly. "I thought someone would come." Agatha softened slightly. "We understand he's missing, and we'd like to ask a few questions." Celia invited them into a sitting room filled with porcelain birds and framed watercolours. She folded her hands. "My father changed after my mother died," Celia said. "He became restless, determined to rebuild his reputation. He made mistakes in business, but he wasn't cruel." "He sold Charles counterfeit wine," Agatha offered. Celia sighed. "Yes, that. He regretted it, you know. He said he panicked trying to cover a larger financial problem." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "And Marina Dovecote, what was her connection?" Celia hesitated. She advised him on land deals. Father trusted her insight. Too much, perhaps. "Why, too much?" Agatha pressed. Celia glanced toward the window. "Because she once worked with a man my father considered dangerous, someone he thought had returned recently. He didn't give details, just that he feared this person's influence." Agatha leaned forward. "Name?" Celia shook her head. "He wouldn't tell me, said knowing would put me at risk." Charles shifted uneasily. Agatha recognized the movement, a sign there were pieces of the puzzle she had yet to pry from him. "If you hear anything," Celia said, voice trembling slightly, "anything at all, we'll tell you," Agatha promised. Back in the car, Agatha crossed her arms. A dangerous associate, a wronged daughter, a fraudulent vineyard. Charles, you pick the best friends. "It's not my fault Sir Lionel attracted trouble," Charles muttered. "I simply bought wine." "And nearly bought a motive for murder," Agatha said cheerfully. Charles shot her a glare. The W.I. Hall was already buzzing when Agatha arrived that afternoon. The comforting smell of tea and biscuits drifted through the room. A fire crackled in the grate. The women of Carsely huddled like happy hens exchanging theories. Doris Simpson spotted Agatha immediately. "Agatha, love," she called loudly enough to make Agatha flinch. "We've heard everything. Marina Dovecote spotted in Cheltenham with a suitcase. Running away, they say." "A suitcase?" Agatha demanded. "What kind?" Doris shrugged. "Blue. Large. Possibly stolen." Agatha closed her eyes. "And how, Doris, did you learn this?" "My cousin's sister works at the bus depot. Said Marina boarded a late bus to Cheltenham, head down, looked terrified." Terrified could mean guilt, or fear, or a really bad haircut. With Marina, Agatha suspected it was the first two. She turned to Charles. "We're going to Cheltenham." He groaned. But they went. The Cheltenham hotel Marina supposedly fled to was a modest place with an overworked receptionist. He flipped through his ledger with weary politeness. "Miss Dovecote?" "Yes, she checked in last night. Checked out this morning." Agatha slammed her hand on the counter. "Checked out? When?" "About an hour ago," the man said. "Left in a hurry. Didn't say where she was going. Just left this note in her room." He held out a folded scrap of paper. Agatha snatched it. One sentence stared back at her. "He knows." Agatha felt a cold flicker in her stomach. Charles leaned over her shoulder, eyes narrowing. "Who's he?" Agatha asked the air. "Too many options," Charles muttered. Agatha folded the note and tucked it away. "We're missing something." "We?" Charles echoed. "Oh, shut up." That evening, Agatha trudged to the vicarage with a mood like a rattling kettle. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door with her usual calm warmth, ushering her inside to the glow of a low fire. "Long day?" Mrs. Bloxby asked gently. "Everyone is lying to me," Agatha said, collapsing into a chair. "Charles, Marina, Sir Lionel, probably Doris Simpson, though she always lies accidentally." Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. "And how are you feeling?" "Irritated beyond measure. I can't make sense of Charles at all. Mrs. Bloxby studied her kindly. Is this frustration because he's being evasive, or because you care whether he's implicated? Agatha bristled. I don't care. Not particularly. Only enough to avoid seeing him imprisoned. And because he's Charles. Ah, Mrs. Bloxby said softly. Don't me, Agatha snapped, standing abruptly. I'm not discussing feelings. Feelings are for people with time. Mrs. Bloxby's smile remained serene. Of course. Agatha fled before the vicar's wife could offer more wisdom. Night settled in with a cold blue glow. Agatha reached her cottage, fumbled for her keys, and paused mid-step. A footprint, clearer than before, marked neatly in the damp earth beside her back door, the same faint tread she'd seen near Sir Lionel's garden. Hodge meowed irritably from behind the door as she burst inside. Someone's watching, Agatha said aloud, more to herself than the cat, and I'm getting sick of being spied on. Hodge flicked his tail, unimpressed. Agatha sat heavily, mind racing, Marina fleeing, a dangerous associate, Charles and fraud, Sir Lionel missing, wine stains, notes shoved under doors, everything was tightening. The phone rang, shrill in the quiet cottage. Agatha snatched it up. Bill Wong's tired voice filled the line. Agatha, he said, we've found Sir Lionel's car, abandoned in a lay-by near the Cheltenham Road. Marina's fingerprint is on the steering wheel. Agatha's breath caught. We're heading there now, Bill said. Don't get involved. Agatha hung up, stared at the wall and muttered, Don't get involved, my foot. Hodge stretched on the windowsill, tail curling like punctuation. Agatha's next move was obvious. Trouble and answers lay waiting in that lay-by, and she would be there before anyone could stop her. A pale band of dawn crept across the Cotswold Hills as Agatha Raisin and Charles Fraith sped toward the Cheltenham Road. The early light painted everything a cold, metallic blue, the sort that made hedgerows look like watchful silhouettes. Agatha clutched the dashboard irritably. You're driving too fast, she snapped. I'm driving precisely as fast as the situation requires, Charles replied, voice flat, which is far too fast. You said you wanted to get there before Bill. Agatha glowered. She hated it when Charles was technically correct. As they rounded a bend, the lay-by came into view. Police cars blocked the entrance. Their lights strobed across the gravel in muted flashes. Officers moved briskly despite the early hour. Crossing under yellow tape stretched between the trees. Charles parked a little way back. Agatha hopped out before he'd turned off the engine. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the faint scent of petrol, wet leaves, and something darker she couldn't quite place. Sir Lionel's car sat crookedly near the embankment, a sleek silver model now streaked with mud. One headlight hung broken, faintly swinging. Agatha shivered. Bill Wong stepped forward, looking as though he had been awake since last Tuesday. Mrs. Raisin, he said wearily. Mr. Fraith. Bill, Agatha said, what have you found? He opened the driver's side door. A stale wine smell drifted out, mixed with damp wool and something sour. Marina Dovecote's fingerprint is on the wheel, Bill said. Fresh, and... Agatha leaned in, scanning the passenger seat. A faint, familiar scent rose from the upholstery. She turned slowly to Charles. That, she said, is your aftershave. Coincidence, Charles muttered. Charles, she said, voice slicing the morning air, you wear that scent to annoy people. Don't pretend this is random. Bill raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Care to explain? Charles pressed his lips together. I have nothing to explain. I've not been in this car. Then how did your scent teleport into the passenger seat? Agatha demanded. Charles glared. I'd like to know that too. Bill looked between them with the resigned expression of a man who regretted his career choices. Look, Marina is now the main suspect. And Charles, you're drifting perilously close to the line of person of interest. So please, both of you, don't touch anything. Agatha bristled. We won't touch anything. She immediately touched the car door again. Mrs. Raisin, Bill said, voice frayed. Sorry, she muttered. She stepped back and surveyed the scene. Something about the tyre marks bothered her. The gravel looked churned, not from a casual stop, but a hurried or forced one. The bushes along the tree line bore snapped twigs. Someone was here before the police, she said softly. Bill shot her a look. We're aware. And someone dragged something, Agatha added. Bill paused. Dragged? That's what it looks like, she said. A heavy weight forced across gravel. Bill reluctantly conceded she had a point. Charles rested a hand on her shoulder. Aggie, he murmured, unusually serious, don't wander off. You tend to do that when clues appear. She shrugged him off. I wander with purpose. Later that evening, a night attendant from the petrol station shuffled nervously under questioning. He wore a cheap fleece jacket and the expression of someone who wished he had slept through his entire shift. You were on duty? Agatha asked. Aye, he said. Late nights they drag on. Did you see a woman? She pressed. Tallish, glamorous, possibly crying? He nodded. Came in around 1, looked a right mess, pacing the forecourt, talking on her mobile, crying, shouting. Early models don't have ID, mind. Couldn't see the number. She kept saying, you must tell me the truth, and something about being framed. Agatha's heartbeat quickened. Framed by whom? Didn't catch that. Charles frowned. Did she leave with someone? The attendant hesitated. I saw someone else. Someone? Agatha repeated. He pointed towards the woods. Tall bloke standing just inside the trees, had a torch, watched her. A cold ripple passed through Agatha's spine. Did you see his face? No, just the outline. Charles exhaled slowly. So, someone else was involved. Of course someone else was involved, Agatha snapped. Marina might be impulsive, but she isn't stupid enough to drag a man's body across gravel alone. That takes muscle, or madness. The attendant swallowed. Hope I've been helpful. Bill thanked him and led him away. Agatha turned to Charles. We're going into the woods. Charles groaned. Aggie, your aftershave was in the car. You don't get to argue. The woods swallowed them with a hush. Damp earth cushioned their steps. The early morning fog still clung to the lower branches, drifting in pale ribbons. Birds chirped tentatively overhead, as though debating whether dawn was worth committing to. Agatha stopped suddenly. Look! Broken branches lay in a line, as though someone had forced their way through. Beneath a patch of brambles glinted white fabric. She crouched carefully. A scrap of monogrammed cloth tore free in her hand. L.A., embroidered in elegant navy thread. Sir Lionel's handkerchief, Charles said quietly. Agatha nodded. So he was dragged here, or passed through here unwillingly. Aggie, Charles murmured, we're being watched. She straightened. The hairs on her arms prickled. The fog shifted with a whisper, too slow, too precise. A silhouette moved deeper among the trees, tall, still, observing. Agatha's heart thumped once, hard. We're leaving, Charles said, gripping her elbow. But now. He pulled her back the way they came, neither of them speaking until they reached the lay-by again. Breath quickened and nerves taut. Bill approached. Did you wander into the woods? We inspected the perimeter, Agatha said primly. Bill stared at her. Please stop doing that. Doing what? Everything you just did. Agatha folded her arms. Fine. Then solve your own case. Bill sighed. I'm trying. By mid-afternoon, the Red Lion buzzed like a shaken beehive. The smoke from the fireplace curled lazily through the warm air. Someone had baked fruitcake, filling the pub with a comforting sweetness that contrasted sharply with the grim gossip. Secret lovers, someone speculated at the bar. Land smuggling, someone else offered. A ghost called Arthur, proposed a third, prompting several nods of approval. Agatha pinched the bridge of her nose. Carsely was incurable. Charles sat beside her, unusually silent. She noticed the strain under his usual charm. Are you going to tell me, she said finally, why Marina left that message for Roy, the one about you and the vineyard account? Charles grimaced. I didn't want to drag Roy into this. Drag him? Roy Silver lives to be dragged. As if summoned, Roy swept into the pub in a flurry of scarves, dramatic energy, and mild hysteria. Aggie, he wailed, my office got a message from Marina. She sounded frantic, said, Tell Agatha I didn't hurt him. Charles must explain the vineyard account. Roy clutched his chest. Explain, Charles, explain before I faint. Charles paled, actually paled. Agatha seized on it at once. There is something you're hiding. Charles swallowed. It isn't what Marina thinks. Then what is it? I can't tell you yet. Agatha gave an incredulous laugh. Charles Fraith, if you don't tell me what's going on, I will call the Daily Mail and let them make up their own version. Aggie, he sighed. Some things are dangerous to reveal, even to you. Especially to me. Yes, he said miserably. She stared at him. There were times Charles irritated her beyond sense, but this fear, was new. Roy fluttered anxiously. Darling, if Charles goes pale again, someone fetch him a gin. No gin, Agatha snapped, not until he talks. Charles rubbed his forehead. I can't. Which, of course, infuriated her. After leaving the Red Lion, Agatha returned home in a storm of frustration. The cottage was warm and smelled faintly of toast, evidence that Hodge had probably been contemplating his own meals without waiting for her. She dropped her coat over a chair and sat heavily. The day had left her tangled. Too many clues, too many motives, too many lies. She longed to light a cigarette, but instead settled for untying her shoes with unnecessary aggression. The phone rang. She nearly didn't answer it. What? She barked. A voice, distorted, low, filled the line. If you want the truth, the caller said, check the Vineyard's books. Agatha's breath caught. Who is this? Click. Silence. She lowered the receiver slowly, a grin spreading despite herself. Well, she muttered, glancing at Hodge, who blinked with feline disdain. Things are finally getting interesting. Hodge stretched, unimpressed. Agatha leaned back, pulse quickening. The Vineyard's books, the one thing Charles refused to discuss. Tomorrow would be fun. A clear, bright morning stretched over Carsely like a clean tablecloth, the kind of no-nonsense blue sky that always made Agatha suspicious. Good weather usually invited bad behaviour. She stood at her cottage window, fingers drumming the sill, thinking about the anonymous phone call and the Vineyard books. Hodge watched her with the tolerant air of a cat observing a human who had just discovered thinking. We're going, Agatha told him. And no, you're not coming. Vineyards are no place for cats or women with tempers. Hodge yawned, unconvinced. Agatha snatched up her handbag and strode toward Roy Silver's rented room in Evesham. Roy had arrived last night in a storm of scarves and anxiety, declaring he was morally obliged to stay until the entire case ended in scandal or romance, preferably both. He opened the door wearing a lemon-yellow shirt and an expression of theatrical exhaustion. Aggie, darling, he sighed. I was just deciding which outfit says, I am too innocent to be questioned, but glamorous enough to be dangerous. Wear whatever you want, Agatha said. You're a distraction. Roy brightened instantly. A vital role. I accept. The drive to Moreton-in-Marsh was orange with early sunlight brushing the hedgerows. Roy talked non-stop, mostly about himself, occasionally about Charles, and once or twice by accident about the case. Agatha let him ramble. She was too busy replaying the phrase, check the Vineyard's books. They reached the Vineyard accounts office just after 10, an uninspiring brick building dressed up with a pretentious gold sign, Ashcroft Vines Littered, Administration Division. Inside, a receptionist with a tight bun and tighter expression sat behind a desk stacked with invoices. Roy leaned on the counter with his friendliest grin. Morning, love, he purred. I'm here to inquire about a very special shipment to London. Something rare. Something intoxicating. The woman blinked. Are you with an account? Not yet, Roy said, but I'm intoxicating enough, surely. Agatha slipped away while Roy unleashed every ounce of charm he possessed. The corridor beyond was quiet, lined with framed posters of French vineyards and framed photographs of grapes that looked uncomfortably like medical illustrations. She spotted a half-open door and slipped inside. The small office held 2 filing cabinets, a desk littered with papers and a half-eaten biscuit. Perfect. She moved quickly, scanning labels. Invoices, export land transactions, Cotswold branch, private agreements, Sir Lionel A. Ashcroft. Her pulse quickened. She yanked one drawer open and skimmed papers. Fake invoices, duplicate shipments, transfers to offshore accounts Agatha couldn't pronounce, and, most shocking of all, land contracts, bearing Marina Dovecote's signature, but approved by Charles Fraith. She froze. Charles signed these. Agatha's heart tumbled unpleasantly. Either Charles was a fool or he was something worse. Behind her came footsteps. She whirled just as Charles filled the doorway, face thunderous. Aggie, he hissed. What on earth are you doing? Investigating, she snapped back. What are you doing here? Looking for you, he said, and then killing Roy, because I assume he let you wander off. Agatha held up a page. Explain this. You signed these documents. Charles deflated like a tired balloon. I know. You know? She demanded. You know? Charles, you've been laundering money for a fraudster. I didn't know at the time. Marina brought me the papers. Said they were for a philanthropic land trust. Building conservation, that sort of nonsense. I didn't read them carefully. Lionel used my signatures to legitimize his schemes. Agatha stared. You trusted Marina? She was persuasive, Charles muttered. Persuasive, Agatha repeated. So is food poisoning. He rubbed his eyes. This is why I didn't tell you. I looked like a complete idiot. Agatha opened her mouth to retort, then stopped. The hurt in his voice was real, painfully so. She cleared her throat. You were misled by a crook and a conniving woman. That's why I'm here. And because you love meddling, Charles added. Yes, Agatha admitted. That too. From the hall came Roy's voice. Darling, if you don't give me those shipping records, I shall simply have to sing. The receptionist murmured something alarmed. Agatha shoved papers into her bag. We're leaving. Back outside, Agatha recounted the anonymous phone call. Charles went pale. I know that handwriting, he said quietly. I've seen it before. It belongs to Damien. Damien? Agatha repeated. Who in God's name is Damien? Sir Lionel's son. Ah, Agatha said. The prodigal heir, the whispered scandal, the family embarrassment. That Damien. Charles nodded grimly. He was supposed to be living in France, working with the vineyard. Last I heard, he had a severe falling out with his father. A falling out, Agatha repeated. Charles, you need to adopt stronger vocabulary. People like Damien don't fall out, they explode. Roy slid into the back seat. Did you find anything scandalous? Fraud? Romance? Murder? Yes, Agatha said. All three. Delicious, Roy whispered. They returned to Carsely to find the entire village buzzing. Doris Simpson was in peak gossip mode. Damien Ashcroft, she exclaimed outside the shop. My cousin's neighbour's sister met him once. Said he had the eyes of a man who'd steal sugar packets. Agatha rolled her eyes. Your cousin's neighbour's sister once said the Queen wore acrylic. Forgive me for not relying on her testimony. Inside the vicarage, Mrs. Bloxby served tea and listened with gentle concentration as Agatha laid out everything. Damien, Marina's forged documents, the vineyard fraud. Mrs. Bloxby set down her cup. This Damien sounds troubled. Troubled, Agatha repeated. Yes, a troubled man with a violent reputation and a missing father. He is more than troubled, Charles added. He's dangerous. A red herring, Agatha said, though she didn't fully believe it. An obvious villain. Too easy. Mrs. Bloxby smiled. Sometimes the obvious villain is still the villain. Not in my experience, Agatha muttered. That afternoon, Bill Wong arrived at Agatha's cottage. He looked as though someone had replaced his morning tea with vinegar. Damien Ashcroft, he said, tossing a file on her coffee table. Returned to England 3 months ago. Fraud in Switzerland, assault in Nice, expelled from 2 countries and rumoured to be unstable. Agatha felt a cold thrill. So he's real trouble. Yes, Bill said, and definitely tied to Sir Lionel's finances. Where is he now? Agatha asked. Bill hesitated. That's the problem. He's been spotted across several counties this week. Mercester, Evesham, and early this morning, he stopped. Agatha leaned forward. And? Bill sighed. On Charles's estate. Agatha felt her stomach drop. What? A farmhand saw a tall man heading toward the old barn. Matches Damien's description. Agatha looked sharply at Charles. You have a barn? Yes, Charles said faintly. And it's abandoned and full of spiders. Perfect place for a murderer, Roy whispered. Bill rubbed his eyes. Nobody is saying Damien murdered anyone. Yet. He was in the woods this morning, Agatha said, watching us. Bill's head snapped up. You saw someone? Yes, Agatha said. Tall, silent, creeping. If that wasn't Damien, it was his twin. Charles ran a hand through his hair. We need to check the barn. We need to check it now, Agatha agreed. Bill raised a hand. Please, do not interfere. I'm heading there with officers. Agatha attempted innocence. Of course, we'll stay here. Bill didn't bother replying. He just left. The moment his car disappeared, Agatha stood. "We're going." "Aggie," Charles began. "Bill told me not to interfere," she said. "He should know by now that saying that is equivalent to issuing me a personal invitation." They arrived at Charles's estate just as the sun dipped into a golden haze. The old barn stood near a tangle of hedgerow, its roof sagging like a drunk. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, but the last rays of sunlight lit the fields in amber strips. Agatha felt her pulse quicken. Secrets lived in barns. Always had, always would. Her mobile rang, the old brick-like model she kept out of spite. She answered. "Yes?" Bill's urgent voice cut through the line. "Agatha, Damien's been spotted going inside the barn. Stay away. We're en route." "Bill," Agatha said, staring at the barn as a shadow moved behind the crooked wood panels, "I think we're already here." The line crackled. "Agatha, do not go inside." She lowered the phone. "Charles," she said quietly, "you should know something." "What?" "If we die in there, you'll never hear the end of it." The next misty morning, Bill Wong was back on the estate. Together they walked out to the barn. A thin, chilly mist rolled across Charles Fraith's estate like the breath of someone anxious. It clung to the hedgerows, smeared the morning light, and made the old barn appear even more derelict than usual, a hunched, sagging silhouette waiting to swallow bad ideas. Agatha Raisin marched toward it with grim determination, Charles trailing reluctantly behind her, and Bill Wong striding ahead with the weary resignation of a man who had long since accepted that Agatha would never obey instructions. Behind them trotted Hodge. "For heaven's sake," Agatha muttered, scooping up the cat before he vanished into the mist. "The one time I need you to behave like a normal, lazy feline, you decide to become an action hero." Hodge meowed in disdain, batting at her coat. Charles shivered. "Fog at this hour. Can't bode well." "Fog never bodes anything," Agatha said. "It merely adds atmosphere. Do try to appreciate it." Bill shot them both a look. "Quiet, please. We don't know who's inside." They reached the barn door. A faint glow slipped through the gaps in the boards, the flicker of a lantern. Agatha felt her pulse thrum with anticipation. She pushed the door open slowly. It creaked, protesting loudly enough to announce their presence to anyone with ears. Inside, the air smelled of old timber, mould and dust disturbed by hurried feet. The weak lantern burned low on an upturned crate, its light casting stretched shadows across the floor. Footprints circled the dusty surface, some large, some small, all hurried. Something shifted beneath the tarpaulin in the corner. "Bill," Agatha hissed. He approached first, hand reaching slowly toward the tarp's edge. Agatha leaned in, breath catching. Bill lifted the corner. Marina Dovecote lay beneath, pale and unconscious, her expensive clothes rumpled, her hair tangled like seaweed. A cracked water bottle lay beside her. "She's alive," Bill said, kneeling to check her pulse. "Dehydrated, frightened, but alive." Agatha let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Alive meant answers, and answers meant progress. Charles crouched beside Marina, worry darkening his eyes. "She looks terrible." "She always looks dramatic when she's in distress," Agatha said. "Some people faint attractively. I faint like a dropped haddock." Hodge sniffed Marina's shoe, unimpressed. Bill searched the surrounding crates. One held wine bottles, empty. Another held a pile of odds and ends, rope, gloves, and something metallic. He pulled it out. "Sir Lionel's pocket watch," he murmured, turning it over in his hands. "And this scarf." The scarf was streaked with dried blood. Agatha felt her stomach twist. "So he was here?" "Or someone wants us to believe he was," Charles offered weakly. Agatha shot him a look. "Charles, darling, we walked through a forest of lies already. This is finally something real." Marina stirred, groaning. Her eyelids fluttered open. When she saw Agatha, she screamed, "No! Don't let him in! He'll kill us!" Bill steadied her. "Marina, you need to calm down. Tell us what happened." She clutched his sleeve. Damien locked me in here. He took my phone, made me call Charles, said if Charles didn't come alone, he'd—" Her voice broke. "He wanted Charles?" Agatha asked sharply. Marina nodded fiercely. "He believes Charles has the vineyard records, the ones proving Damien embezzled money. He framed Sir Lionel, used Marina, me, to run the forged land deals. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Agatha folded her arms. You didn't know? You didn't know that all your contracts had Charles's signatures attached to half of Provence? Forgive me for doubting the innocence of someone who keeps designer pens for forging purposes. Agatha, Charles warned, but Agatha ignored him. You lured Sir Lionel, didn't you? She said. Marina shook her head violently. No, Damien did. Damien threatened him. I tried to intervene. Sir Lionel pushed Damien away and then... She swallowed. Sir Lionel collapsed, Marina whispered. Heart condition. He fell. He wasn't attacked. Damien panicked, said everyone would think he'd killed him, so he staged a struggle, dragged things around, broke furniture, told me to run or he'd blame me too. Agatha stared at her. That's your story? It's the truth, Marina cried. Agatha wasn't convinced. The woman was trembling, but her eyes kept darting toward Charles, calculating, fearful, guilty. Something didn't add up. Marina, Agatha said softly, what aren't you telling us? Marina's breath hitched. She looked down. I thought, if Charles took the blame, it would keep Damien away from me. Agatha felt a wave of disgust. You were willing to sacrifice Charles, Marina sobbed. I was terrified. Damien is unbalanced. He said Charles betrayed him. Said he'd deal with him next. Ah, Agatha said quietly. So you did lure him. Marina's silence answered for her. A sound cut through the barn, a sharp scrape against the door. Bill rose instantly. Stay behind me. The door creaked open. Damien Ashcroft stood there, tall, gaunt, wild-eyed, holding a tire iron in one shaking hand. His hair hung loose over his forehead, and his clothes were rumpled as though he'd slept in them for days. The fog behind him swirled like smoke around a silhouette of danger. You shouldn't have come, he said, voice hoarse. Any of you. Agatha felt fear crawl icy fingers up her spine. Charles shifted closer to her. Damien, Bill said calmly, put the tool down. Damien ignored him, his gaze fixed on Charles. You always had everything, he spat. Father trusted you. You were the golden boy, but you ruined the accounts. You signed what you shouldn't. You made me look like the villain. You were the villain, Agatha snapped before Bill could stop her. You used Marina. You lied to Sir Lionel. You ran fraudulent deals. And now you're hiding in a barn like a rejected pantomime villain. Charles groaned. Aggie, please. Oh, do be quiet, Agatha said. Damien raised the tire iron. You don't understand. Charles stole the ledger. He took the records. I just want them back. Charles didn't steal anything, Agatha said. You framed Sir Lionel. Marina helped. And now you're cornered. Father said he'd destroy me, Damien whispered. Said he'd hand everything to Charles. He left me with nothing. You stole from him, Agatha said. Actions have consequences, even for men with dramatic cheekbones. Damien lunged. Charles reacted instinctively, stepping forward with alarmed aristocratic indignation. Really, he said loudly, is this necessary? Must you always resort to melodrama? Tire irons are so common. At least choose a decent dueling pistol if you're going to threaten someone. Damien blinked, confused just long enough for Agatha to snatch the empty wine crate beside her and hurl it at his shins. Damien stumbled. Bill surged forward, tackling him to the ground. The tire iron clattered across the floor. Agatha stood panting, glaring at Damien's prone form. Honestly, she muttered, these Ashcroft men are exhausting. More scandal than the W.I. Bake-Off. Charles placed a hand on her shoulder. Nicely thrown. Thank you, Agatha said. I've always had excellent aim when infuriated. Police sirens sounded in the distance as Bill cuffed Damien. Marina dissolved into incoherent sobbing. Hodge leapt onto a stack of crates and began grooming himself with offended dignity. Charles exhaled shakily. So Damien was behind everything. No, Agatha said slowly. Not everything. Something in the corner caught her eye. A small wooden box, half hidden beneath hay. She opened it. Inside lay a single folded letter, handwritten, addressed to Charles. You must choose which truth to tell. Agatha felt the world tilt. Charles, she said quietly, this is Sir Lionel's handwriting. Charles took the letter, face paling as he read it. Agatha watched him, the barn still heavy with mist and dust and lies. The truth, at last, was close, closer than comfort. The Cotswolds awoke under a pewter sky, the kind that dulled colours and softened edges, making even Charles Fraith's estate look modest. Agatha Raisin sat in the passenger seat of Bill Wong's car, arms folded, foot tapping. Charles followed behind in his own vehicle, his engine purring fussily as though offended by the entire morning. They were heading to Mercester Police Station, Marina Dovecote in custody, Damien Ashcroft under arrest, and Sir Lionel still missing. Agatha's nerves felt tight enough to slice bread. The moment they walked into the interview corridor, Marina's thin voice drifted out from the open door. "I'll tell everything," she said. Just stop making me talk to Agatha." "If you told the truth the first time," Agatha muttered, "you wouldn't have to talk to me at all." Bill gave her a warning glance. "Please behave." "That has never once helped an investigation," she said, brushing past him and walking in. Marina sat at a table, pale and exhausted, her dramatic glamour wilted. Her hands shook around a cup of water. Her eyes darted to Charles first, then away. Agatha marvelled at the woman's selectivity. She only looked guilty with people she wanted forgiveness from. Bill sat opposite her. Agatha leaned on the wall, arms crossed. Charles looked awkwardly sympathetic, which annoyed Agatha further. "Start from the beginning," Bill said. Marina swallowed. Sir Lionel knew. He discovered Damien was siphoning funds through offshore accounts. He confronted Damien after a board review. Damien panicked. He forged Father's signature. "We know the fraud," Bill said. "Tell us about the night he collapsed." Marina squeezed her eyes shut. "Lionel arranged to meet me at the Vineyard office. He said he needed proof of Damien's wrongdoing. He also wanted Charles present, but Damien intercepted the message and changed the location. When I arrived, Damien was already there. He yelled at his father, said Lionel planned to cut him out of the will permanently." Agatha leaned forward slightly. "And then what?" Marina's voice broke. "Sir Lionel tried to leave. Damien grabbed him. Lionel pushed back. He was old, frightened. He collapsed. I tried to help him, but Damien screamed I'd killed him, that Charles would take the blame, that everything could still be fixed if we hid the body." "So Damien staged the fight," Charles said quietly. Marina nodded. "He dragged Lionel's things around, smashed the chair, stole wine bottles, knocked them over, told me to run, said if I stayed he'd kill me too. Her shoulders slumped. "I believed him." Bill sat back. "Where is Sir Lionel now?" Marina shook her head helplessly. "Damien wouldn't tell me. He just said Father wasn't dead. Not yet." A silence stretched across the room. Agatha's gaze drifted to the item in her handbag, the letter found in the barn. "You must choose which truth to tell." Agatha spoke the words softly. Marina froze. Bill frowned. "What letter?" Agatha pulled it out and laid it on the table. Marina stared at it with wide, terrified eyes. "That," Marina gasped. "Sir Lionel wrote that. He wrote it days ago, before everything happened." "Meaning?" Agatha demanded. Marina swallowed. "Meaning he was planning to expose Damien, but he also feared what would happen to me if Damien dragged me into the scandal. He said someone had to choose which truth to reveal, the truth that protected the innocent, or the truth that punished the guilty." Agatha felt a chill. Meaning Charles could be ruined, or Damien could go to prison, one or the other. Marina closed her eyes. Sir Lionel didn't want Charles destroyed. He cared for him, respected him, but he knew Damien was spiraling. He wanted to handle it privately, to force Damien to confess. "And instead," Agatha said flatly, "he collapsed in a fight. Wonderful family management." "He's alive," Marina whispered. "Damien told me that. He said Father was safe somewhere." Agatha's mind clicked like a turning key. The Vineyard books, the hidden ledger, the private reconciliations, Lionel's habit of secrecy. She turned to Charles. "Does your aristocratic memory recall any secret hiding places? Somewhere Lionel would take someone for a quiet talk?" Charles blinked. "There was the old Vineyard cottage, a tiny place on the far end of his land. Lionel used it for private meetings. He once brought me there when—" He stopped abruptly. Agatha arched an eyebrow. "When what?" Charles coughed. "When he wanted to scold me without witnesses." "Perfect," Agatha said. "Let's go." Bill stood. "You're not going anywhere." "Bill," Agatha said sweetly, You either drive us, or we get there first and make a mess of your crime scene. Choose wisely." Bill groaned but grabbed his coat. "Fine, but for once, no wandering off." Agatha ignored him. The drive to Sir Lionel's vineyard took them along narrow country lanes bordered by golden winter fields. The mist had burned off slightly, revealing patches of brittle sunlight. Agatha tapped her fingers anxiously on her knee, her mind racing through clues, misdirections, motives. The cottage appeared at the end of a private track, a low stone building with ivy clinging to its faded walls. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney. "Someone's inside," Agatha whispered. Bill signalled for silence. He approached first, hand hovering near his baton, though Agatha privately doubted its usefulness against criminals with tire irons and emotional instability. Charles lingered beside her, breathing unevenly. Bill pushed the door open. Inside sat Sir Lionel Ashcroft. He was alive, pale, exhausted, weak, but alive. He lay on a makeshift cot near the hearth, wrapped in a tartan blanket. His thinning hair stuck to his forehead, his eyes fluttered open. "Charles," his voice was a cracked whisper. Charles moved to him immediately. "Lionel, you're alive?" "Barely," Lionel croaked. "Damien. He kept me here. Wanted me to rewrite the will. Wanted everything. Thought I owed him the world. Foolish boy. Foolish father." Agatha knelt beside him. "Why didn't you tell anyone the truth?" "Truth," Lionel murmured, staring into the fire. "Truth is a luxury. Sometimes it saves people, sometimes it destroys them. I thought Charles might suffer for my mistakes. And Marina? She's foolish, but not cruel. Damien ensnared them both." Agatha softened despite herself. "You should have trusted someone." "I did," Lionel whispered. His gaze shifted to Charles. "I trusted you. Always." Charles swallowed thickly, his usual lazy charm stripped away. "Lionel, I didn't know Damien." "I know," Lionel said. "This was my failure, not yours." For the first time Agatha could remember, Charles looked genuinely overcome, not theatrically emotional, but truly shaken. She rolled her eyes to cover her own uncomfortable sting of sympathy. "Honestly," she muttered, "you two are turning into a pair of sentimental old hens." Bill stepped forward. "Sir Lionel, we need your statement. Damien has been arrested. Marina is cooperating. We can end this properly." Lionel nodded weakly. "I'll tell you everything." Agatha stood, brushing dust from her trousers. Relief washed through her. Relief for Charles, for the case, for the end of a puzzle that had twisted itself around her brain for days. She moved toward the window, needing a breath of cool air. Outside, the vineyard stretched in quiet rows, the winter vines bare but patient. Behind her, Lionel spoke again, this time in a fragile whisper. "One more thing. Charles kept a secret from you." Agatha stiffened. Charles let out a strangled noise. "Lionel." But Lionel continued. "Years ago, long before Marina helped me, Charles planned to propose to her." Agatha turned sharply. Her heartbeat thudded once loudly. "Propose?" she said, voice dangerously soft. Charles looked mortified. "Aggie, it was years ago. Long before you and I, before anything." "You plan to marry Marina Dovecote?" Agatha demanded. "The woman who colour coordinates her lies with her handbags?" "I didn't propose," Charles said helplessly. "I changed my mind. Lionel advised against it." Lionel nodded. "I did. Marina is complicated." Agatha stared at Charles with a storm she did not entirely understand. Jealousy, irritation, curiosity, something sharper beneath. She swallowed it all at once and said stiffly, "Well, you certainly know how to choose them." Charles winced. "Aggie, I didn't tell you because it didn't matter." "It matters to me," she said, "because every time I think you're hopeless, you surprise me, and every time I think you're reliable, you disappoint me. It's exhausting." Bill cleared his throat. "We should probably get Sir Lionel to hospital." "Yes," Agatha said sharply, "before someone else marries Marina." Charles groaned quietly. As Bill and the paramedics escorted Sir Lionel outside, Agatha stayed back for a moment, staring at the empty hearth. Hodge brushed against her ankles, having followed her in without permission. She sighed, scooping him up. "Men are ridiculous," she told the cat. "Old ones, young ones, aristocratic ones, all the same." Hodge purred smugly as though confirming her point. Agatha stepped out into the sunlight, closing the cottage door behind her. The truth was no longer tangled. The threads lay exposed in the pale winter light, painful, human, imperfect. And somewhere inside that mess, her own heart beat with a stubborn, foolish hope she refused to name. Carsely glowed beneath a late afternoon wash of pale gold, the sort of winter light that tried its best to be cheerful but never quite succeeded. Agatha Raisin stormed down the high street anyway, heels snapping against the pavement. Her fury scattered sparrows from the churchyard wall and made Doris Simpson pause mid-gossip at her gate. Behind her, Charles Fraith trotted like a guilty spaniel. "Aggie, slow down!" "If I slow down," Agatha shot back, "I may hit you." Charles winced. "I didn't lie." "You failed to mention," she hissed, "that you once intended to marry the woman currently sitting in police custody like an over-perfumed houseplant." "It was years ago. And I suppose that makes it irrelevant." Charles hesitated. "Well, yes." Agatha made a strangled sound and marched faster. She hadn't been this humiliated in years. Not by murderers, reporters, or even the Women's Institute. But Charles's confession, accidental thanks to Sir Lionel's dramatic honesty, had struck something raw. She refused to examine what. Charles caught her sleeve near the post office. "Aggie, please. Marina manipulated me. She fluttered her eyelashes. I was young and stupid." "You still are," Agatha snapped. "Only now you're older." Before he could respond, Doris Simpson leaned over her garden wall. "Ooh, Agatha dear, we heard everything. Is it true you staged the whole scandal to win Charles back?" Agatha froze. "What?" Doris nodded sagely. "Everyone's saying it. That you orchestrated Marina's downfall so Charles would come running." Charles choked. Agatha spluttered. Doris smiled, satisfied. Agatha straightened, forcing icy dignity. "Doris, if I ever orchestrate anything, you'll know. I'll be wearing diamonds, he'll be unconscious, and there'll be helicopters." Doris beamed as if Agatha had confirmed something important. Agatha stomped away. By the time she reached the WI hall, her mood had soured into determination. If the village insisted on viewing her through a ridiculous lens, she would at least control the angle. She burst through the WI doors and found the entire committee in chaos. Mrs. Bloxby stood serenely in the centre, presiding over what appeared to be an impromptu baking competition. "Our scheduled baker has fallen ill," Mrs. Bloxby explained gently, "so we've organised an emergency lemon drizzle bake-off." "Excellent," Agatha said briskly. "I'm entering." Betty Jackson blinked. "But we've already started." "And I'm entering," Agatha repeated, marching past the table of ingredients. She had no intention of baking anything. She slipped out, dashed to the Carsely shop, bought the last remaining lemon drizzle cake on the shelf, and hurried back to the hall. With ruthless efficiency, she trimmed the icing, added a few curls of fresh zest, and presented it as if she'd conjured it from thin air. The judges tasted in careful silence. Mrs. Bloxby smiled kindly. "Agatha, this is lovely." Agatha lifted her chin. "Of course it is." She won first prize by unanimous vote. For one glorious moment, her mood lifted. The WI applauded. Even Betty Jackson clapped grudgingly. But the triumph fizzled almost instantly as Mrs. Bloxby touched her arm and looked into her eyes. "Agatha," she said softly, "sometimes we cling to anger when we're frightened of something gentler." Agatha blinked. "I'm not frightened." Mrs. Bloxby's smile deepened. "No, you're simply human." Agatha wanted to argue but found no words, so she huffed, gathered her plastic-wrapped prize cake, and left. That evening, Sir Lionel invited them all to a small dinner at his manor. A humble thank you, he called it. Agatha almost refused, but then she imagined Charles turning up without her, and Marina fluttering eyelashes across the table. She went. Lionel's dining room glowed warmly with candlelight. Soft piano played from an old wireless. The guests, Bill, Mrs. Bloxby, Roy, in an offensively sparkly scarf, and Marina herself, released pending formal statements, milled politely. Agatha arrived in her sharpest navy dress. Charles looked relieved when he saw her. Roy bounded over like a bright, excitable parakeet. "Darling Aggie, I've been telling everyone you solved the case using sheer force of personality." "Roy," Bill muttered, "that's not—" "Oh, hush, Bill. No one likes accuracy at a party." Agatha actually smiled, but joy evaporated seconds later. Marina drifted toward Charles, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Charles, I owe you an apology." Agatha stiffened. Marina continued, eyes earnest. "Years ago I used you. I see that now. I'm sorry." Charles rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, thank you. It means something." Agatha's jaw clenched. She could almost taste lemon drizzle from sheer tension. Marina stepped back, glancing at Agatha with a mixture of guilt and curiosity. "No hard feelings?" "None at all," Agatha said sweetly. "If I had hard feelings, you'd know. There'd be police tape." Marina blinked. Charles groaned. The dinner proceeded with polite small talk, excellent wine, and intermittent stabs of jealousy Agatha refused to acknowledge. She deflected emotion with sarcasm, which worked until dessert, when Charles leaned closer on the terrace. They stood under a pale moon, the vineyard stretching soft and silver beyond the garden wall. "Aggie," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." She crossed her arms. "For what? For having a life before me? For nearly marrying a liar? For never telling me anything until it explodes?" Charles inhaled sharply. "I didn't tell you because I thought you'd laugh at me, or pity me, or decide I wasn't worth the trouble." Agatha snorted. "You're always trouble." "Yes," he said, "but I wanted you to think I'm trouble worth keeping." Her breath caught. That was dangerously honest. She looked away. "You never trust me with the full story. You tell half the truth and expect me to guess the rest." Charles stepped closer, voice low. "I never know if you'll love me or kill me." Agatha's cheeks warmed. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not," he murmured. "I care for you more than I should, more than is wise." Agatha felt something fragile wobble inside her chest, something like hope, something she did not want to name. She panicked. "Well," she said briskly, "your timing is awful, and your romantic history is worse, and frankly, you drive me insane." Then, flustered, she turned and fled down the terrace steps, almost tripping over Lionel's garden gnome. Charles watched her go, helpless and fond. She walked home briskly through the cool night, chilled enough now to think clearly. The moon cast long shadows over Carsely's cottages. A thin breeze stirred the hedgerows. Her heels clicked rhythmically along the quiet lane. By the time she reached her cottage, she had almost convinced herself she didn't care what Charles felt or didn't feel. She opened her front door. Hodge meowed accusingly from the hallway rug, tail flicking as if demanding an explanation for her absence. "Oh, hush," Agatha muttered, bending to stroke him. "You're still my favourite man." Hodge accepted this with smug satisfaction. Agatha hung up her coat and froze. Something sat on her hall table, a thick envelope sealed with old-fashioned red wax. She picked it up slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sir Lionel Ashcroft. Agatha's heart thudded. She broke the seal and unfolded the ledger inside, a final vineyard book, dense with notes, figures, and cross-referenced dates. On the last page rested a small handwritten message. "For Agatha Raisin, who sees what others miss." Agatha stared at the words for a long moment, the quiet of her cottage wrapping around her like a soft blanket, the scent of Hodge's fur, the creak of the old floorboard, the faint hum of her answering machine. She felt something settle, not victory, not pride, something gentler. She placed the ledger on the table, switched on the kettle, and let her breath out slowly. "Perhaps," she murmured to Hodge, "I'm not quite done with this ridiculous village." Hodge purred in agreement. And in the warm glow of her kitchen, as the kettle clicked to a boil and the night settled soft against the window, Agatha Raisin allowed herself, just for a moment, to believe she might one day forgive Charles Fraith. But not tonight. Tonight, she put the ledger away, poured herself a strong cup of tea, and sat beside the fire while Hodge curled contentedly in her lap. A small, ordinary ending, exactly the sort Agatha Raisin needed. Carsely woke beneath a soft, pearly sky, the kind that promised calm but delivered gossip. Agatha Raisin stood at her kitchen sink, staring out at the hedge Hodge insisted belonged to him alone. The village felt restored. No police cars, no suspicious shadows, only damp grass, distant cockerels, and Hodge's indignant yowl demanding breakfast. She filled his bowl, ignoring his offended glance. "You're lucky, you know," she muttered. "At least no one accuses you of orchestrating scandals." Hodge flicked his tail. utterly untroubled. Word of Damien's arrest had travelled across Carsely faster than Betty Jackson sprinting to a cake sale. Doris Simpson swore she'd heard Agatha bravely wrestle the villain to the ground. Roy phoned from London claiming he'd leaked the entire affair to a newspaper. "Publicity, darling. You're a rural icon now," he'd trilled. Agatha had hung up on him. By mid-morning, Bill Wong arrived, raincoat half-buttoned, dark hair damp. "Thought I'd check you're alive," he said mildly. "You did save about 3 people, you know." Agatha sniffed. "Bill, don't exaggerate." "Fine, 2.5. They shared a brief smile. Bill's quiet admiration softened her irritation, for a moment. After he left, Mrs. Bloxby appeared at the door holding a warm casserole. "You've been through quite a week," she said gently. "Do sit down, Agatha. You look tired." "I am not tired," Agatha protested, sitting anyway. "Just annoyed." "With Charles?" Mrs. Bloxby's voice was soft but piercing. Agatha bristled. "He hid things, important things." Mrs. Bloxby stirred tea as though coaxing truth from leaves. "People hide things when they fear losing what they cherish." Agatha blinked. "He doesn't cherish me." "Oh, Agatha," Mrs. Bloxby smiled with weary kindness. "You see every flaw but miss every devotion." Agatha opened her mouth to respond, then thought better of it. She muttered something about casserole portions. Mrs. Bloxby patted her hand and departed with quiet grace. The afternoon slipped by gently. Agatha sorted through Sir Lionel's ledger again. At the front she found the handwritten note she'd tucked away earlier. "You possess the one virtue most lack, courage without self-deception." "Sentimental old fool," she muttered, sliding it into a drawer with unusual care. The doorbell rang. Hodge trotted over as if expecting royalty. Charles Fraith stood outside, holding a hamper of expensive wine. His expression hovered between contrition and charm. "Aggie, I brought peace offerings." "Bribery," she said coolly. "How noble." He stepped inside. The hamper clinked softly. "You don't have to drink it." "Good. I wasn't planning to." Charles exhaled. "Agatha, about Marina." "I don't want to discuss her," Agatha said sharply. "Or vineyards, or fraudulent signatures." "Then what do you want?" Agatha opened her mouth, then shut it again. She had no idea. Charles looked uncharacteristically timid. "I'm an idiot. I should have trusted you sooner. I thought honesty might scare you off." "Honesty?" She raised an eyebrow. "Charles, I've faced murderers, poisoners, and lunatics with homemade chutneys. I can manage you." His laugh was soft. "Right. Then, would you join me for dinner tonight? Nothing dramatic. Just a meal. Perhaps a truce." Agatha hesitated. Pride stirred. So did loneliness. So did an irritating flicker of hope. "On one condition," she said. Charles straightened. "Anything. You never, ever hide facts from me for my own good again." He nodded solemnly. "Agatha Raisin, I give you my word." Agatha eyed him. "Words aren't your strongest currency." "True, but I'll try," she sighed. "Fine. Dinner." Charles brightened in that maddeningly boyish way that made her chest tighten. Hodge brushed against his trousers as if granting approval. 7:30? Charles asked. "Make it 8. I need time to pretend I'm not eager." He grinned. 8 it is. When he'd gone, Agatha lingered in the quiet hallway. She felt oddly lighter. Not safe, not secure, nothing so dull, but lighter, as though the village air had blown some clutter from her heart. Hodge mewed, curling round her ankles. She bent to stroke him. "Men are trouble," she said, "but they do keep life interesting." She moved to the fireplace, lit a single cigarette, and watched the smoke drift lazily upward. It felt like a punctuation mark, sharp, familiar, and faintly defiant. Outside, the village settled into evening. Windows glowed with warm squares of light. The scent of someone's shepherd's pie drifted down the lane. A pair of teenagers cycled past, laughing. Somewhere a garden gate creaked. Carsely was peaceful again. But Agatha knew peace never lasted long around her. She glanced at the closed ledger drawer. Something about that vineyard business felt unfinished. A detail tugged at her memory, something too small for the police to care about, but too odd for Agatha to ignore. She smiled to herself. "Well," she murmured, tapping ash neatly into the tray, "I suppose trouble will find me soon enough." Hodge stretched luxuriously before curling into sleep by the fire. Agatha watched the flames dance, a wry amusement tugging at her mouth. A quiet ending, a fleeting calm, a small victory, exactly the sort that never lasted. And somewhere in the soft breath of Carsely's night air, the next mystery waited patiently, just beyond the hedgerow.